Welcome back to the deep dive. Have you ever had that moment, where you're deep into learning something new? Maybe it's complex coding or advanced physics, could be anything really,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly it just collapses.
Mm-hmm. That feeling.
Yeah, and you realize the reason you can't get your head around Chapter 10 isn't because Chapter 10 is inherently impossible.
No, not at all.
It's because Chapter 3, the one you thought you'd nailed, was actually, well, built on shaky ground.
Built on sand,
That
exactly.
exact feeling, the sheer frustration, right? Like you're
Yeah.
putting in all this effort, running up that down escalator, only to find out you missed something fundamental, maybe years ago. That's what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
We're focusing squarely on learning gaps and conceptual weakness.
Mm.
Honestly, this might be the biggest single roadblock to long-term success, both academically and professionally.
It really can be. And it's important to stress this isn't about intelligence.
No, definitely not. It's about having a foundation that's maybe incomplete or just fragile. Okay, let's unpack this properly. Our mission today, it's pretty comprehensive. We want to really define this problem clearly. Look into the three main areas causing it: academic, psychological, environmental factors.
Right, the root causes.
Exactly. Then figure out how to spot the signs, the actual symptoms. Understand the educational theory behind why these concepts are so critical.
And crucially, the what next.
Yes. Most importantly, we want to arm you with a really detailed toolkit, practical strategies, things you can actually use to close these gaps.
Yeah, that's the goal. And maybe we should start with getting that definition really clear.
Good idea.
When we talk about a learning gap, what we really mean is that that functional delta, it's the difference between what you should know based on your academic level and what you actually demonstrably understand and can use.
So not just what you can repeat back, but what you can do.
Precisely. And the real danger, like you said, is that underlying conceptual weakness. It's a failure to truly grasp the fundamental principles. Because if those aren't solid, well, anything you try to build on top is just going to be unstable. It doesn't matter how hard you work later on.
Okay, let's make that conceptual weakness really concrete then.
Mhm.
So we're not just talking about forgetting like a minor historical date or maybe mixing up a definition. That's more of a memory blip.
Right, that's a retrieval issue. Conceptual weakness
Mm.
that shows up when you're asked to go beyond just recall, when you need to actually use the information, perform a function with it.
Got it.
So it's this inability to really internalize the fundamental principles. Take chemistry, for example. A student might be able to perfectly recite the law of conservation of mass. Matter isn't created or destroyed.
Okay, textbook definition.
Yeah.
Check.
Right. That's a recall. But then you give them a complex chemical equation to balance. And if they can't apply that law, track the elements, realize the mass at the start has to equal the mass at the end. That's the conceptual failure. They know the rule, but they can't use it.
Knowledge versus understanding.
Yeah.
And application.
Exactly. And you really see how this stuff snowballs, how it compounds.
Oh, definitely. Especially in certain subjects.
Absolutely. Subjects where everything builds sequentially, they're the most vulnerable. Mathematics is the classic example, isn't
The
it?
prime offender, yeah. If you never really, truly got fractions down.
Then the day you hit rational expressions in algebra, it's like game over. Your brain just hits a wall.
It's like trying to read a book when you only know half the alphabet.
It's exactly that cascade effect.
Yeah.
Math is obvious. Weak algebra means trouble with quadratics, logarithms, calculus, you name it. It all becomes this foreign language you're just trying to memorize rules for without understanding. But you see the same destructive pattern in science, too. Physics concepts like momentum or energy conservation, they build directly on understanding simple motion and forces first.
Right.
And even in professional fields like accountancy, the whole system rests on truly getting the double-entry bookkeeping concept. If that foundation is shaky,
Then every financial statement, every audit you do later is potentially flawed.
built on quicksand, that prior understanding is just non-negotiable for future learning in these areas.
So if we just, ignore these weak spots, hope they go away, they don't.
They absolutely don't. They tend to accelerate, actually. It becomes this vicious cycle. It creates this sort of invisible ceiling on your understanding.
Okay, let's connect this to the bigger picture then.
Right.
If someone doesn't address these gaps, especially moving into higher education or their career, what are the real long-term consequences?
Oh, they're far-reaching and pretty devastating, honestly, extending way beyond just grades. Academically, the immediate thing is just this chronic inability to keep up with more advanced topics.
Constantly playing catch-up or feeling like you are.
Exactly. Which leads to, frequent failure, struggling in important exams, and seeing grades steadily decline. The student keeps hitting that conceptual ceiling because their foundation just can't support the complexity.
That sounds incredibly demoralizing.
It is, and we absolutely have to talk about the psychological cost. Ignoring these gaps chips away massively at self-esteem. It breeds huge self-doubt, reduced confidence, and sometimes what psychologists call learned helplessness.
What's that exactly?
It's that feeling that, well, no matter how hard you try, you just can't get it, that you're just not capable of understanding the material.
Wow.
And that fuels serious academic anxiety. It can be paralyzing when you're put on the spot, like in tests or even just class discussions.
And I guess that internal struggle, that anxiety, it must show up externally too, right? In their behavior.
Absolutely. The behavioral signs are often really key indicators, though they can be misinterpreted. Well, you might see complete withdrawal in class. The student just shuts down, doesn't participate. Why risk looking foolish if you suspect you don't understand right?
Makes sense. Avoidance.
Avoidance, yeah. Or avoiding challenging subjects altogether if they can. But sometimes you see the opposite.
Like acting out?
Exactly. Disruptive behavior can actually be a pretty sophisticated defense mechanism. It masks the underlying weakness. If the teacher's busy dealing with the disruption, they're not focused on the fact the student maybe can't grasp a basic concept.
That's a really important point. It's not always about defiance.
Often it isn't. And then thinking longer term. This shaky conceptual grounding really does limit future options. Weakness in core subjects, that directly impacts how you do in competitive entrance exams for college or university.
Yeah, you're starting behind the curve.
Massively. Imagine spending your first year of university basically doing remedial math that should have been solid years ago. You're immediately at a disadvantage compared to peers who have that strong foundation. The gap doesn't magically close. It can become a real barrier later in your career, too.
Okay, that paints a very clear, maybe slightly sobering picture of the consequences. So now let's shift from the what to the why. Why do these gaps happen in the first place? Our sources kind of group this into three main pillars, right? Academic, psychological, and environmental causes.
That's a great framework. Yeah.
Let's start where the learning is supposed to happen. The academic side, the system, the classroom. ###Jose. Academic and pedagogical causes.
Okay. Well, arguably the biggest single factor, especially in systems that are heavily focused on standardized tests, is the emphasis on rote learning versus genuine understanding.
Just memorizing facts instead of getting the concept.
Exactly. If the system primarily rewards you for memorizing formulas or dates, rather than demonstrating you understand the why and can actually apply it, well, students are smart. They'll naturally take the path of least resistance to get the grade.
So they prioritize cramming for the test over actually learning it deeply.
Precisely. Short-term recall wins over durable, flexible understanding.
And that's not always the student's fault, is it? It can be systemic.
Oh, absolutely. Think about standardized tests. It's often just easier to measure recall, did they remember the definition, than it is to assess complex application or critical thinking.
So the curriculum kind of bends towards what's easily measured.
It often does. It's simpler for a teacher, under pressure, to check if a student remembered a fact than if they can, say, synthesize two different historical perspectives into a coherent argument.
Yeah, I see that.
And this gets compounded by just the sheer speed of modern education, the curriculum pacing issue.
Too much material, too little time.
Pretty much. Teachers are often under immense pressure to cover a huge amount of content by certain deadlines. There's often just not enough time baked in for students to really consolidate what they've learned.
Like trying to build that brick wall you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
but having to add the next layer before the cement on the first one is dry.
That's a perfect analogy. You might have covered Chapter 3 last week, but if it wasn't properly cemented in your understanding, by the time you hit Chapter 5, that knowledge is already wobbly, and the class is already moving on to Chapter 6.
So what happens when a student does fall behind? Maybe they were sick for a week or just needed a bit more time to process something.
Well, that's where the institutional lack of remediation becomes a huge problem. Those missed concepts, those gaps that open up, they rarely get addressed with proper, dedicated revision time built into the system.
There's no pause button.
Effectively, no. There's often no systematic mechanism to say, okay, let's pause the main flow and individually help the student patch this specific gap. So the student is just forced to keep building their knowledge structure, but with missing bricks.
And this standardized approach, it probably doesn't work for everyone equally, does it?
No, and that leads right into the one-size-fits-all trap. We know people learn differently. Some need to hear it, some need to see it, some need to draw it, some need hands-on activities, some just need more time to reflect.
But teaching often relies heavily on lectures, right?
Often, yeah. A standardized delivery method, like lecturing, inevitably fails to meet all those diverse needs. And for students who don't learn best that way, the gaps just naturally widen.
So the system itself might be hiding the problem until it's too late.
That brings us to assessment failures. If the tests and evaluations focus mainly on grades derived from recalling facts or procedures, rather than truly digging into the depth of understanding and the ability to apply concepts.
Then you don't spot the weakness early on.
Exactly. The system fails to diagnose the root conceptual issue until maybe the student hits a much tougher course down the line and suddenly crashes. They might have scraped by on earlier tests by memorizing steps, but the conceptual gap was there all along, hidden, just waiting to cause problems. Hashtag tag B, psychological and cognitive causes.
Okay, that's the system. Now let's move inside the student's head, so to
Yeah.
speak. The psychological and cognitive causes. These feel a bit more subtle, perhaps.
They can be, yeah. A major one is the level of engagement, passive learning.
Just physically being there, but not really mentally in it.
That's it. The student might be sitting in class, maybe even taking notes, but they're not actively wrestling with the information. They're not questioning it, challenging it, trying to connect it to what they already know.
More like recording than processing.
Good way to put it. Just passively absorbing or trying to.
And even if they are trying to actively engage, there are limits, right?
Definitely. We have genuine cognitive limitations, especially concerning our working memory.
Okay, what's working memory again?
Think of it like a small mental whiteboard, or maybe your computer's RAM. It's where you hold information you're actively thinking about right now. But it's limited. You can only juggle a few pieces of information there at once before something gets dropped.
Okay.
So imagine a complex physics problem. It might require you to recall 5 formulas from previous chapters, manage several steps in the calculation, and learn 3 new principles all at the same time.
That sounds like overload.
It is overload for working memory. The brain often has to jettison some of the older concepts just to make space for the immediate steps of the new problem. And that can lead to a complete breakdown in understanding the whole picture.
Wow. Okay, this next one sounds really crucial. Metacognitive blindness. What's that about?
This is absolutely core. It's essentially a student lacking the skill to accurately judge what they know and what they don't know.
So they think they understand something, but they actually don't.
Exactly. A student suffering from this might read a chapter, follow the examples, and think, yep, got it, just because the words seemed familiar or the steps made sense in isolation. But they haven't actually tested themselves. Can they explain it in their own words without looking? Can they apply it to a slightly different problem?
They haven't checked for true understanding.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that metacognitive awareness, this ability to self-monitor, it's a skill that needs to be taught and practiced.
So if students operate under this false sense of mastery,
They don't ask the crucial questions. They don't seek help when they should. They might study the wrong things or not study effectively because they think they already know it. They fail to self-correct.
that seems like a huge barrier.
It is. And this can be compounded if there are undiagnosed issues at play. Things like learning disabilities that haven't been picked up, like dyslexia, affecting language processing, or dyscalculia, affecting number sense and spatial reasoning.
So these aren't about intelligence, but about how the brain processes certain information.
Precisely. They fundamentally change how someone processes sequential information or abstract concepts. And if these issues are just masked by, say, avoidance behaviors, instead of being properly identified and supported, they act as massive, often permanent roadblocks to building conceptual understanding. Hashtag C, environmental and social causes.
Okay, that covers the academic and the internal psychological factors. The third pillar is the environment around the student, the social and physical context.
Right, this is incredibly powerful too. It can either be a strong support structure or a significant source of disruption.
Like what kind of disruptions?
Well, even seemingly simple things, like disruptions from frequent school transfers, maybe due to a family move or just high absenteeism from illness or other issues, these can be fatal for academic continuity.
Because you miss key building blocks.
Exactly. If you happen to miss the specific week where the teacher introduces, say, the core concept of energy transfer in physics, and then your new school is already a chapter ahead, boom. A gap opens up immediately, and it's really hard to close later without specific effort.
And the home environment must play a role too.
A crucial one. And we're not necessarily talking about having tutors or lots of expensive resources, although those can help. It's more about the fundamental home environment, the level of support and structure.
Like encouragement, a quiet place to study.
Yes. A lack of parental encouragement or simply not having an appropriate, reasonably quiet, organized place to focus at home that seriously limits a student's ability to consolidate what they learned in school. Learning doesn't stop when the bell rings. That reinforcement at home is vital, otherwise the school material just kind of fades.
Makes sense. What about social factors, like peers?
Peer pressure can be huge and often very internalized. If a student sees their classmates seeming to grasp concepts much faster or consistently doing better on tests,
They start comparing themselves.
right, and that can lead to a rapid loss of confidence. They start thinking, I'm the problem, I'm the slow one. This makes them even more likely to hide any confusion or weakness.
Because asking a basic question feels socially risky.
Exactly. The perceived social cost of revealing they don't understand becomes too high, so they stay silent, and the gap remains or widens.
And then there's the modern elephant in the room. Technology.
Ah, yes. Technology overuse. Now, technology offers amazing educational tools, no doubt. Khan Academy, interactive simulations, fantastic resources.
Okay.
But excessive unstructured use, especially constant engagement with, say, rapidly changing short-form content like social media feeds or quick videos, can actually train the brain for shallow engagement.
Less focus, less deep thinking.
Potentially, yes. Deep conceptual learning requires sustained attention, the patience to grapple with complexity, the ability to connect networks of ideas. If your brain gets accustomed to constant, immediate, bite-sized rewards, it can struggle with the slower, more effortful process of deep conceptual understanding.
Okay, so we've defined the problem. We've dug into the roots: academic, psychological, environmental. Now let's shift gears to detection. How do we actually spot these conceptual weaknesses? We need to know the signs.
Right. And it's helpful to think about this from two angles: how the student experiences it internally, and what a teacher or parent might observe from the outside.
Good distinction. Let's start with the student's perspective. What does it feel like? Hashtag, raise A. Symptoms from the student's perspective.
Internally, the most telling symptom is profound application difficulty. This is the real differentiator from just forgetting something.
Huh.
They might be able to recite the definition, like Newton's second law, FMA. They know it.
Okay.
But then you give them a slightly unfamiliar word problem, maybe calculating the force needed for a car accelerating, but the mass is changing and they just freeze.
They can't connect the formula to the situation.
Exactly. They have the piece of knowledge, but they lack that fluid, functional understanding needed to apply the basic principle in a new context. It hasn't become part of their working toolkit.
And that feeling of freezing up, that must be stressful.
Hugely stressful. Which leads directly to high anxiety and dependency. They feel anxious during tests, or when the teacher asks questions, because deep down they know their understanding is shallow, maybe brittle.
And the dependency part.
They become excessively dependent on just memorizing everything, trying to memorize every single possible type of problem and its specific steps, instead of mastering the underlying principle that applies to all of them.
Patching holes with memory instead of fixing the foundation.
Perfectly put, they're constantly trying to patch with memorization instead of strengthening with understanding.
And does this sometimes lead to a really noticeable drop in performance?
Yes, often quite suddenly. A visible performance crash. Maybe a student did reasonably well in earlier grades, say primary school, where things were simpler, maybe more focused on recall.
Right.
But then they hit a subject in middle or high school that demands much more abstract thinking, more conceptual heavy lifting, like maybe proof-based geometry or complex organic chemistry mechanisms, and suddenly their performance just tanks.
It looks like they suddenly got less smart.
Which isn't true at all. The demands simply outstripped the limits of their rote-learned foundation. That fragile structure just collapsed under the weight of the new complexity, and it's often baffling for both the student and observers. #BB, indicators from the teacher's perspective.
Okay, so that's the internal experience. What about for someone watching a teacher, a parent, maybe a tutor? What concrete signs should they look for?
From the outside, the indicators are often quite diagnostic if you know what to look for. A big one is persistent foundational errors.
Meaning mistakes on the easy stuff.
Exactly. The student might be attempting a complicated calculus problem, but the mistakes they consistently make are in the basic algebra steps, things they should have mastered years ago. They're tripping over the fundamentals, not just the advanced parts.
That's a clear red flag.
Another one is marked inconsistency, even within the same subject.
How so?
Well, a student might ace the multiple choice part of a history test that relies on recalling dates and names, procedural recall. But then they completely bomb the essay question that asks them to compare the underlying causes of two different revolutions, which requires conceptual analysis.
So their performance is really uneven. Good at recall, poor at analysis.
Right. It reflects that they've maybe mastered shallow skills, but not the deeper concepts.
Are there behavioral clues too? Things you might see in the classroom?
Definitely. You often notice distinct hesitation or silence during class discussions that require actual conceptual understanding.
They're okay with facts, but not why.
Precisely. They might happily contribute factual information, but ask them why a scientific principle works, or ask them to synthesize two different ideas, and they often go quiet or become extremely hesitant. That's often the moment they're hitting their personal conceptual ceiling.
And that hesitation, is it linked to motivation?
It often connects to what looks like a lack of drive or engagement. A student grappling with deep conceptual weakness might seem uninterested or lacking curiosity during lessons, partly because they feel perpetually lost or locked out.
So they seem passive.
Yeah, and they become highly reliant on very explicit instructions, needing immediate examples for everything or step-by-step prompts for every single task. They often don't try to explore the concept independently because they lack that internal mental framework, that conceptual map to guide their own exploration. They just wait to be told exactly what to do next.
Okay, so we know what it looks like. We know the causes. This whole issue, it really seems to boil down to how our brains build knowledge. There are some key educational theories that help explain why these conceptual gaps are so damaging, aren't there?
Absolutely. Connecting this to established frameworks really helps us understand the mechanics of why concepts are the bedrock. We really have to start with Jean Piaget's constructivism.
Okay, Piaget. What's the core idea there?
Piaget argued that learning isn't passive absorption, it's an active process. Students literally construct their own understanding by interacting with information. When they encounter something new, they first try to fit it into their existing mental structures, their existing ways of thinking. That's called assimilation.
Like fitting a new puzzle piece into the existing picture.
Exactly. But sometimes the new information just doesn't fit the existing picture. It contradicts it, or it's completely novel. In that case, the student has to actually change their mental structure, rebuild their understanding to make room for it. That's accommodation.
Okay. So assimilation is fitting it in, accommodation is changing the structure itself.
Right. And learning gaps often emerge when a student fails to do either of those effectively with a new concept. Maybe they just try to memorize the puzzle piece, without really figuring out how it connects or changes the overall picture, the schema.
So the new idea just floats around disconnected.
Precisely. It remains isolated noise, not integrated, usable knowledge. Piaget really stresses that this requires conscious, active, mental effort grappling with the idea to truly build that structure.
Okay, that makes sense. Who else helps us understand this?
Well, Lev Vygotsky and his concept of the zone of proximal development, or ZPD, is critical, especially when we think about how to fix gaps.
The ZPD, I've heard of that. It's about what a student can do with help, right?
Exactly. The ZPD is that crucial space between what a student can already do totally independently and what they can achieve with guidance from someone more knowledgeable, a teacher, a peer, even a well-designed computer program. That guidance is called scaffolding.
Like trading wheels on a bike.
Good analogy. Scaffolding involves things like breaking down complex ideas, providing hints or analogies, asking guiding questions, modeling the process. Vygotsky said that real learning happens within the zone, with the right support.
So how does this relate to learning gaps?
Well, if a student is stuck on a fundamental concept, let's say basic exponents, that's far below their current ZPD for the topic being taught in class, like logarithms, the instruction they're receiving is simply too far beyond their current independent ability, even with help.
The gap is too wide for the scaffolding to bridge.
Exactly. The necessary scaffolding for the actual problem, the missing exponents concept, isn't being provided. So the student either stays stuck, becomes permanently dependent on step-by-step instructions for logarithms without understanding, or just disengages. The ZPD tells us we need to target the support precisely at the edge of their current understanding.
Focus on the prerequisite they're missing right now.
Yes. And then there's the hierarchy idea, which Bloom's taxonomy, revised, makes crystal clear.
Bloom's, that pyramid of learning skills.
That's the one. It provides this blueprint for cognitive depth. It shows that higher order thinking skills, the things we really want students to achieve, like analyzing, evaluating, creating, synthesizing, all depend entirely on mastering the lower order skills first.
Like remembering and understanding.
Exactly. You need that base layer of knowledge, remembering the facts, the steps, and comprehension, understanding what they mean, before you can effectively apply them in a new situation or analyze them, break them down, or
Hmm.
evaluate them, judge their worth, let alone create something new.
It's sequential. You can't skip steps.
It's absolutely sequential and non-negotiable. Trying to jump straight to analysis without solid comprehension is, like you said earlier, trying to build the third floor when the first floor isn't stable. Missing those foundational conceptual layers inevitably leads to a fragile, shaky structure when tackling more advanced work.
And this isn't just a small, isolated problem, is it? What's the bigger picture, globally or nationally?
No, it's widespread. Our sources highlight this. For instance, a UNESCO Global Education Monitoring Report from 2023 suggested something like 58% of students globally show significant learning deficiencies in core subjects.
Wow, over half.
Yeah. And it's often attributed directly to things we've discussed: curriculum overload, teaching strategies that prioritize just covering material over ensuring deep understanding.
So it's a recognized systemic issue.
Very much so. And nationally, here we see bodies like NSER emphasizing the need for competency-based learning precisely to tackle these conceptual and skill gaps. The focus is deliberately shifting, or trying to shift, from just checking what students know, recall, to assessing what they can actually do with that knowledge. Can they apply it? Do they understand the concepts? That's becoming the priority.
Okay, this feels like the main event, where you've defined the problem, explored the causes, seen the symptoms, understood the theory. Now, the crucial part, what can we actually do about it? We need the practical strategies, the toolkit for closing these gaps.
Absolutely. This is where we move from analysis to action. We need to synthesize the most effective strategies into things people can actually implement. Hashtag A, academic reinforcement, and study techniques, the how-to.
Right, the very first step always has to be diagnosis.
Mm.
You need to practice diagnostic action.
Finding out exactly where the problem is. Precisely. Use diagnostic tests, maybe old quizzes, end-of-chapter problems from a previous grade level, quick online assessments. You have to pinpoint the specific concept that's weak. Is it understanding variables in Algebra 2, Chapter 3? Be that specific. You can't fix a structure until you know exactly which beam is faulty.
Okay, so pinpoint the weakness. Then what?
Then comes a technique that requires a bit of intellectual humility, but it's incredibly powerful: the backward learning method.
Going back to basics.
Essentially, yes. If you're struggling with Chapter 7, you don't just keep banging your head against Chapter 7. You deliberately pause and you go back to Chapters 1, 2, 3, wherever that diagnosed foundational weakness lies.
Even if it feels like going backward.
Especially then. You revisit those earlier concepts, focusing specifically on mastering the parts you miss. It feels slower initially because you're covering old ground, but you're not just reviewing, you're rebuilding for strength. You must get that foundation solid before you try to tackle the advanced material again.
Okay, backward learning. What else helps build that real understanding?
Visualization and explanation are key. Using tools like concept maps can be incredibly helpful.
Drawing connections between ideas.
Yes, visually mapping out how different topics relate to each other, organizing them hierarchically, not just as a linear list in your notes. It builds a more holistic picture. And then there's what I consider the gold standard for checking your own conceptual clarity: the Feynman technique.
Ah, Richard Feynman, the physicist. How does his technique work?
It's brilliant in its simplicity, and it forces you out of just passively reading. Step 1, pick the concept you want to understand deeply, let's say photosynthesis.
Okay.
Step 2, try to explain it out loud in the simplest terms possible, as if you were teaching it to someone who knows nothing about it, maybe a child, or even just, a rubber duck on your desk.
Talking to your rubber duck.
Hey, it works. Step 3 is the crucial part. The moment you get stuck, the moment you have to use complicated jargon you can't simplify, or you realize you can't clearly explain how one step leads to the next, that is your precise point of conceptual weakness. You've just found it.
The explanation itself reveals the gap.
Exactly. So step 4, you go back to your textbook, your notes, whatever source material, and you focus only on understanding that specific weak spot you just identified. Restudy just that bit. Then you try the explanation again from the beginning, simplifying it even further.
And you keep doing that loop.
You repeat that loop, explain, identify weakness, restudy, re-explain until your explanation is crystal clear, super simple, and uses no confusing jargon. The rule is, If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it deeply enough. It's a far better check than just rereading.
That sounds really effective. It forces active processing.
It does, and this ties into generally focusing beyond what when you study. Always push yourself to ask why and how.
Not just the facts, but the reasons and mechanisms.
Right. Don't just memorize what happened in a historical event. Ask why the economic policies at the time led to that outcome and how those effects rippled through society. Understanding cause and effect, the underlying mechanisms, that's what makes knowledge stick and become usable.
Okay. What about memory techniques? We hear a lot about those.
Yes, and they are crucial, but specifically for conceptual mastery, not just rote facts. We need to leverage the science of active recall and spaced repetition.
Active recall is like testing yourself.
Exactly. Pulling the information out of your brain, not just passively pushing it in by rereading, using flashcards, doing practice questions without looking at the answers first, trying to summarize a concept from memory. That retrieval effort strengthens the neural pathways.
And spaced repetition.
That's about timing your review strategically. Instead of cramming, massed practice, you review a concept at increasing intervals. Maybe you review it the next day, then again 3 days later, then a week, then a month. This forces your brain to work harder to retrieve the information each time, moving it from fragile short-term memory to durable long-term understanding. It's scientifically proven to be far more effective for long-term retention than cramming.
So testing yourself spaced out over time.
Yes. And finally, for truly deep comprehension, you need to be applying learning. Find ways to connect the theory to the real world.
Make it relevant.
Make it relevant. If you're learning about supply and demand in economics, look for examples next time you're at the grocery store or in news headlines about gas prices. If you're learning physics principles, think about them when you're playing sports or driving a car. Connecting abstract concepts to tangible, real-life contexts makes the understanding much deeper and more functional. Hashtag B. Self-regulation and cognitive strategies.
Okay, those are powerful academic techniques. What about managing our own thinking? Tackling that metacognitive blindness we talked about.
Right, this is about self-regulation. You need to consciously develop metacognitive awareness. It's about actively monitoring your own learning.
How do you do that practically?
One simple way is keeping a concept journal. After each lecture or study session, take 2 minutes to jot down. What were the 1-3 key ideas? And crucially, what part is still fuzzy or confusing to me? This forces you to reflect honestly. What do I actually know versus what do I need to figure out?
Making your understanding visible to yourself.
Exactly. And to combat that feeling of being overwhelmed, especially in subjects where everything builds, it's vital to set micro goals.
Small, achievable steps.
Tiny ones. Don't aim to master an entire difficult chapter overnight. Focus on understanding just one core concept or even one tricky type of problem per study session. That small, achievable win builds momentum and prevents the kind of academic anxiety that can shut you down completely. Over time, those tiny wins add up to significant progress.
That sounds much more manageable. What about working with others?
Leveraging social interaction is powerful. Collaborative mastery through things like peer teaching is excellent.
Teaching someone else helps you learn it better.
Immensely. Try teaching a concept you feel a bit shaky on to a friend or study partner. Just the act of having to structure the information logically, anticipate their questions, and explain it clearly forces you to solidify your own understanding. It immediately highlights where your logic is weak or your explanation isn't clear.
Makes sense. Anything else for self-regulation?
Consciously try to link new concepts with prior knowledge. Don't treat each topic as isolated. Actively ask yourself, how does this new idea in chemistry relate to the atomic structure I learned last year? Building those connections creates a richer, more robust mental network.
Okay. And what about dealing with mistakes? We all make them.
This is maybe the most important psychological shift. You have to embrace mistakes. See them not as failures, but as diagnostic information.
Data points.
Exactly. Don't just look at a wrong answer on a quiz, feel bad, and move on. Analyze it promptly. Why did you get it wrong? Was it a calculation error? Did you misapply a formula? Or did you fundamentally misunderstand the underlying concept? Digging into the reason for the error is the most potent form of targeted remediation there is. Hashtag C, environmental and lifestyle adjustment.
Right, turning mistakes into learning opportunities. Now, let's talk environment again, but this time, how to make it supportive.
Yes, the external environment provides the stability needed for the deep focus required for conceptual learning. First, establish a consistent study routine.
Same time, same place.
Ideally, yes. Studying the same subject in the same quiet, organized space, Around the same time each day helps build habits and momentum. Minimize distractions. External chaos often translates to internal cognitive noise, making deep thinking harder. Regularity creates stability for learning.
Okay, routine and space. What about the emotional environment?
Critical. You need open dialogue. This means fostering an environment, whether it's with a teacher, parent, mentor, or even study group, where it feels safe to be vulnerable about what you don't understand.
We're asking a dumb question isn't actually dumb.
Exactly. If asking for clarification on a fundamental concept feels like a huge social risk, students will simply hide their doubts and they'll never get closed. You need that psychological safety to admit confusion and seek help.
And technology. We talked about overuse, but can it help with remediation?
Absolutely. Used strategically, digital remediation tools are fantastic for targeted help. Platforms like Khan Academy, maybe extra marks depending on your curriculum, NSERT's digital resources, they're often structured by specific concept and grade level.
So you can zero in on the exact gap.
Precisely. You don't have to reread an entire textbook. You can use these resources for short, focused bursts, maybe just 15, 20 minutes, to practice and reinforce that specific concept you identified in your diagnostic step. It's surgical learning.
Okay. And underlying all of this, there's mindset, right?
The mindset shift is perhaps the most profound change needed, especially if someone has struggled for years and started to believe they're just not good at a subject. You have to actively cultivate a growth mindset.
The idea that abilities aren't fixed.
Yes. It's the belief, strongly supported by neuroscience now, that intelligence and abilities aren't fixed traits you're born with. They can be developed through verification, focused effort, learning from mistakes, and using effective strategies. It means shifting your internal narrative.
So instead, I'm just bad at math.
You start saying, okay, I haven't fully mastered algebraic manipulation yet, but I'm working on the specific techniques. It's about focusing on the process and the potential for improvement. And crucially, celebrating small steps of progress, not just waiting for the final perfect grade. Hashtag tag D, the Student Growth Toolkit, actionable steps.
Okay, this is fantastic. We've got the techniques, the mindset shifts. Now let's get really practical. You mentioned a toolkit-specific actionable steps someone can take, like today.
Yes, we wanted to provide concrete blueprints, not just theory, but actions. Let's start with the concept gap audit. This is simple but really powerful for getting clarity.
Okay, how does the audit work?
Grab a piece of paper or open a doc. Step 1, list maybe 5 core subjects you're dealing with right now. Step 2, within each subject, list the main topics you've covered recently or are foundational. Step 3, for each topic, honestly rate your current understanding on a scale of 1 to 5.
1 being clueless.
Pretty much. 1 means I really couldn't explain this properly. 5 means I feel confident I could teach this to someone else simply.
Okay, rate everything 1 to 5.
Step 4, identify every single topic you rated below a 3. That list right there is your immediate prioritized hit list of conceptual weaknesses. It's your personal strategic plan. You know exactly where to focus your efforts first.
That's brilliant. So specific. Okay, I've got my list of weak spots. What's the plan to attack them?
That's where the concept reinforcement plan comes in. This is a focused 4-step routine you can apply to tackle one of those weak concepts each day or maybe every couple of days.
4 steps. What are they?
Step 1, revise the concept from your primary source textbook, reliable website, lecture notes, but focus specifically on understanding the why and how, not just memorizing. Step 2, solve maybe 3 different practice problems or examples related only to that concept. Step 3, teach it. Explain it out loud to your friend, your cat, your rubber duck. Use that Feynman technique. Step 4, reattempt a quick quiz or a few application-based questions specifically on that concept, checking if you can now apply it correctly.
Revise, solve, teach, retest. Focused on one concept. I like it. How do I track my progress beyond just feeling better about it?
Good question. Beyond grades, which can lag, our sources suggest using a simple self-assessment worksheet. This focuses on the behaviors and feelings associated with strong conceptual understanding.
Okay, what does it look like?
You rate yourself, maybe 1 to 5 again, 1 for strongly disagree, 5 for strongly agree on about 5 key statements. Things like, 1, I can see how the topics we're learning now connect logically to things we learned earlier.
Right, making connections.
2, I can explain the main ideas of a concept in my own words without needing to look at my notes.
The Feynman test again.
3, I make time to review important foundational topics sometimes, even if the test on them is over.
Maintaining the foundation.
4, When I don't understand something in class or while studying, I proactively seek help or clarification fairly quickly.
Not letting gaps fester.
And 5, I feel confident trying to apply what I've learned to new or slightly unfamiliar problems.
Application confidence. Okay, so
Yeah.
you rate yourself on those.
Yes. And then there's a simple interpretation rubric. Add up your score. If you're consistently scoring, say, 20/25, that indicates strong, healthy conceptual understanding. But if your total score is, say, below 10, that's a major red flag.
What does a low score mean?
It signals potentially deep, unaddressed conceptual gaps. It means immediate, focused remedial action using the audit and reinforcement plan is really necessary. You can't afford to just wait and hope it gets better or rely on the next test score. The self-assessment indicates a foundational issue now.
Okay, that's a useful internal check. How do I build this into my daily routine?
Use a daily adaptability planner. This isn't just scheduling study time, it's about building in conscious reflection.
Like how?
For instance, you might schedule 7:20 to 7:30 a.m. specifically to review the key concepts from the previous day's trickiest class. And critically, have a column next to it. Retention check. Yes, no. Did it stick? Be honest. Then maybe schedule 15 minutes before bed, say 9:00 p.m., just to quickly summarize the main takeaways from your study session that day, again reflecting on your clarity.
So it's about constant small feedback loops.
Exactly. Daily accountability and immediate granular self-assessment rather than waiting weeks or months for exam results to tell you there was a problem.
And does this lead to deeper reflection?
That's the goal. It culminates in regular reflection exercises, maybe once a week. Ask yourself honestly, which concepts are still confusing me the most and why? Is it because I'm missing a prerequisite concept? Is my study method not working for this topic? What specific strategy, like drawing a concept map or doing the Feynman explanation, actually helped me understand something difficult this week? And how do I typically react initially when I hit something I don't understand? Do I shut down, get frustrated, or do I have a plan to seek specific help?
Wow, those are powerful questions.
They are. These metacognitive checks, done regularly, are really the engine that drives sustained self-directed improvement in conceptual understanding. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Wow, okay, we have really covered a huge amount of ground today, from understanding how insidious rote learning can be and the real limits of our working memory, all the way through to the nuts and bolts of doing a concept gap audit, the power of the Feynman technique, and that fundamental need to shift towards a growth mindset.
Yeah, and it's worth circling back to the theory, just briefly. Pagacci tells us we need that active engagement to build understanding. Vygotsky shows us the need for targeted support, that scaffolding within our learning zone. And Bloom reminds us you absolutely must master the foundations before you can effectively analyze or apply.
It's all connected. Addressing these conceptual weaknesses, it really isn't about just studying more or faster.
No, it's about studying smarter, more structurally, more surgically. It's fundamentally a structural problem in your knowledge base, and it demands a structural solution.
That really raises an important question, I think, for everyone listening. If we know that real mastery, real retention, often depends on things like reviewing notes within 24 hours to beat the forgetting curve,
Right.
and maybe spending just 15 focused minutes each day on tackling one specific tricky concept you identified in your own gap audit, then the question is, what's the one small, concrete step you will commit to taking, maybe starting today, to begin filling a gap you recognized during this deep dive?
That's the key takeaway. Don't try to tackle everything at once. Don't keep pushing on to advanced material if the foundation feels shaky. Start small, maybe with that audit, or trying the Feynman technique on one concept. But start building that solid, shock-proof foundation now.
Couldn't agree more. Start small, build strong.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this really crucial deep dive into mastering the basics and tackling those learning gaps. We hope you found it valuable.
Hope so too.
We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.